Well, in ministry, there are certain things that are necessary in order for your church to thrive. Some of those things are being consistent. And so today on Practical Church Planting, we're going to share with you 6 things that need consistency for your church to thrive.
Welcome to Practical Church Planting. My name is Brian Brammer, and with me is Dylan Dodson. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about 6 things that need consistency for your church to thrive.
So one of the challenges in ministry is doing lots of different things, changing them, trying them different ways, but then people don't know what to expect when they sign up for them, or you can't even really know how to explain them because you're always doing it differently. And so being patient, was it Eugene Peterson said, this is discipleship to Jesus, so it's a little bit different, but also similar, like a long obedience in the same direction. Following Jesus is the same, consistent over the long haul. And in our 6 years of New City Church experience, one of the things I just really learned is be patient, give it time, do it the same way. As long as it's working. you're going to tweak things totally, but like overall, and you'll start to see results over time. But you got to be patient. You got to stick with it. And it's one thing to refine what you're doing. It's another thing to change it altogether. Sometimes you do need to change it. You change a lot of things often, then that can be a detriment. So 6 things that need consistency for your church to thrive. Number 1 is your ministries. Now, this is some of these are probably bigger than others. This is probably a big one in terms of how you run certain ministries, and if they're inconsistent based on who's running it or what's happening or week to week, it's really hard for people to sign up or get connected or for you to even explain it. So one of the things we talk about on this podcast a lot is how we do community groups. Our groups function pretty much the same way. So when we explain what our groups are, everyone what you're signing up for. Yeah. So typically they share a meal or some sort of snack, and they hang out and they do our community group leader guide, which is sermon-based. Mm-hmm. That's how they all function. Now, some meet once a week, some meet every other week, but how they function is relatively the same. Now, we actually have a couple of people at New City that lead various groups that are not in that format. And so therefore they are not New City community groups. So some people from New City, some people from outside New City go to these groups, and that's great. Encourage them. For us, we just want people to be in community, but they're not a community group, because what can happen really quickly is like one person has an idea for a group they want to lead, which is great, and then another person does, and then another person does, and all of a sudden you can no longer explain from stage maybe or your sermons what a group looks like. Yeah. And so it's not to discourage these things. I think they're great. If someone has a passion or desire, let them do it. But just be clear what it is and what it isn't. And there could potentially be some awkwardness if someone's like, well, I want to do this, and why can't this count, and why can't you announce my thing? So you do have to be willing to stick to this. Yes, yeah. So encourage people what they're doing, but groups is a great example. They look the same. And so when we communicate them, we are able to communicate what they actually look like.
There's actually one group that branched off of another one purely because of logistics and time. So it was a fine separation, but it needed to happen because of location as well. But what they do is they actually will meet, I think it's 3 times out of the month, and then the other month, so it might be the first week, they actually have a guys group and a girls group. Now, a lot of them that are in their community group also come, but there's some others that are in other community groups or that don't even actually go to New City, and they do that. And so I let people know when they're joining this community group, they meet on the second, third, and fourth, because that's New City Community Group, and they also have this other thing that they do. And so, yes, it is important. It's not like we don't want to support that other thing. Yep. It's you want that consistency. We're going to be having a meeting here shortly with all the community group leaders, and so that's also going to be something very vital, because it is very easy to kind of get off course. Even though you have the same discussion guide, the groups look different. It's like pulling teeth some weeks, where I know with my group, it's it's a hard time for us to stay on topic because we're always talking, which is a good problem to have. But yeah, that consistency, so people know what to expect, and that when anybody asks Dylan, myself, or any of the other community leaders, the answer is the same. Yep.
And this in a small ways, the personality of the group, if you will, might look different, but how it functions is the same. And we're totally good with people doing other things. It's just not a community group, so that we can clearly say what they are. Another example would be your kids' ministry. If, depending on who's leading it, who's back there, and what's happening, do you have the same type of curriculum every week? Or is it just dependent on who you can get to serve? Or is it just is some weeks it's structured? Is it some weeks the kids are just running around like doing nothing? And so obviously some of this is dependent on who you have serving and who's on your team and that sort of thing. But if it's inconsistent, then parents might be like, if it's like, for example, maybe it's clean sometimes and not others. It's like, well, this is a clean environment, or it looks like it's safe and organized, and sometimes it doesn't. Like it's just not going to be a good thing. And so whatever you do consistently, you want to be consistent with it. You can tweak it and you can change things, but it needs to be like the same thing, if that makes sense. So,
and you definitely want to look for opportunities to tweak.
Right.
Like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and we'll talk about serving in a second as well. But serving is also an area in terms of what it looks like, what are the expectations, like is everybody doing their own thing, or like here's what we ask people to do when they serve. Some people can do a little bit more if they want, but like what are the baseline expectations? You need them all to be consistent, or you'll have a really hard time getting people to show up, getting people to sign up, getting people to be connected, because if they don't know what they're doing. It reminds me, so we used to do for a while a trivia night at New City. We did it like once a month, and then we moved to our new building a couple years ago. We did it once a quarter because we have some other churches that rent it. And I just remember when we first started doing our trivia nights, we have an old episode on this, on the first like 100 episodes, I think. It's called $2 Trivia Night at first. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But at first, we started doing these trivia nights, and we thought they were awesome, but we didn't have like a theme. And so they were kind of like very like meh.
Yeah.
I was like, we know not everybody comes to everything, but I was like, more people should come to this. And then after a couple of months, we realized, we should pick a theme. So we did like The Office, we did Elf, we did
board games.
We've done a whole bunch of stuff. And now the thing is, not everybody is super excited about that theme. After a while, some people just came because it was fun. And some people would come because they wanted to do that theme. But regardless, people knew the expectation of what kind of trivia it was. Just saying it's a trivia night was not helpful. And even like saying, hey, we're doing Star Wars, and someone's like, I'm not coming because I couldn't care less about Star Wars. That's fine. You're still going to get enough people that come because they knew what they were signing up for. So what that has to do with this is, if your groups are all over the place and you say sign up for a group, but you can't articulate in a quick manner what a group is, then people are not going to sign up for it. So consistencies, you want to be, your ministries want to be run consistently. Number 2, your sermon prep process. We talk about this a lot. It's something you do a lot. Or you could put in this area anything you do regularly that takes more than an hour or two. So like Brian does all of our videos, and so there's certain things he does every week. Or we do the Bible in a minutes. We batch those out. But like you do the sermon every week, you do the sermon clip every week, and so it seems to be like you have a schedule of like you do it at the same time.
I try to get the video stuff done for that week or the past Sunday by at least Tuesday. I try to get everything done on Monday, but that's just it makes, because there's been times we've had a lot of videos recently, at least a lot.
Yeah, we have had a lot of videos recently.
And so sometimes there was like I was doing video on a Thursday because I had everything else done, so I could focus on.
But those were a little different. I'm talking about the ones we do consistently. You seem to do them at the same
time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So those extra ones are different. But I think that's helpful because it's like, it's no longer stressful, like when I'm going to get to this. Like I know at these times I work on these videos, and it always works for me, and it always gets done. When we do the extra videos, obviously it's a little bit more effort. Now that's, so whether it's sermon prep or anything you do that takes multiple hours, you need to put on your calendar, here's when I do it, here's when I always do it, and then you trust that process. So we've talked about sermon prep a lot, talked about my process a lot, but you will be overwhelmed and stressed out if you're always moving things around to fit when people want to meet or whatever, as opposed to put on your schedule first. You'll have time for other things, but if it's not consistent, you're going to have a hard time being a consistent preacher, particularly for this example, because your stuff's all over the place.
You don't want to play catch up. Like sometimes you can do that on like a busy week, but consistently playing catch up is you'll start to kind of not enjoy ministry. That's kind of how that spiral goes down, as you stop enjoying that because you're all over the place, and if there's no consistency in your own life, it just becomes a burden.
Yeah, like New City's been around over 6 years now, and I preach majority of the time, especially this last probably calendar year, or not like these last 12 months. I preach more than normal because we've had staff transition, and then we haven't had really preaching. I mean, Brian's preaching, so happy to get him on the rotation here soon in a couple weeks. But it's been like, we've had, we've had other people come in and preach, outside preachers or church planters, but when you do that, you kind of like want to let them do their own thing instead of making them do the series, particularly if you're doing like a difficult series or whatever. So, and for us, we think church planting is important. Like, I'm not going to have a church planter come preach on a holiday weekend. So it's like, I couldn't necessarily lately, the past 12 months or so, it was harder for me to pick when to take off and when to not, which is fine. And I'm not complaining. I think one of the things that's helpful is I enjoy preaching, so it's like not really a drain as much as it might be for some. But also my consistent rhythm has really helped me. if not, having these long stretches of preaching without a Sunday off could really wear on you. And it does a little bit, but it's just really helpful to have a rhythm. So my big thing is artificial deadlines. Put artificial deadlines in your preaching process or whatever you do. Don't wait till the last minute. And that's really helpful. I think too, as you guys know, I'm not a fan of busy. I had someone on Sunday. I forget who knows this and who doesn't. So
a lot of people know it.
A newer guy has been coming to New City, him and his wife. They're not Christians. Well, I mean, I don't think they really understand the gospel yet.
Gotcha, yeah.
They're super new to church. They were invited by someone out. They've come pretty inconsistently. Last month, they've been more consistent. They're getting married in November, and he asked me if they could do their wedding, and I was like, sure, happy to do it. I'm talking about pre-marriage counseling, all that sort of thing. And he's like, hey, listen, I know you're super busy. And I don't think I did. I was like, bro, I'm not busy. And I don't think I've had that conversation with him. He's like, yes, you are. I was like, no, I'm not busy. I said, I have things going on, but I'm not busy. Just my default. Why am I saying that? There are certain times of the year that are quote unquote busier, maybe Easter, maybe Christmas, if you got a big thing. And I'm not discounting that you have more to do. Like for us, we have our Easter and we had our anniversary service back to back, which happens very often because it's around the same time. And so we do a few extra things. And so there's more going on. However, it doesn't mean it has to necessarily be like so overwhelming you can't do anything if you just plan ahead of time. So if you have a Easter video and you're shooting the video on Wednesday of that week, and you're trying to incorporate it into your sermon and the person's trying to edit it, that's a problem. If you shoot it a month in advance, even if you're not editing it a month in advance, things are just ready.
Yeah.
Or so we have an Easter video. We have every year we do one way New City's impacted you. We have a ton, on Sunday morning we just grab a bunch of people and have them answer, and we did that a month in advance. And so there's certain plannings and things of how we're going to do on Sunday in the lobby, whatever. We just plan these things a month in advance. And so when it comes, it's not like this. Oh, I'm paralyzed. I can't do anything. For me, one of my things is we do a local pastors gathering. It's Acts 29. I mean, you don't have to be Acts 29 to come. And this year I took over as the area lead for our area for Acts 29. And so now I'm in charge of them. And I said, we're doing these every month, and we're doing them in the summer, and we're doing them in December. Because there's the whole thing of everyone's out of town. There might be some people less, but you don't take 3 months off. More people travel in a more condensed period of time, but we still have things to do. That's why we run our community groups in the summer. So they might be a little bit less attended, but people are here. Also, for things we would never gather in December because we're busy. I'm first of all, there's a lot of lead pastors that come to this. Some of them are larger churches, and I'm y'all ain't the ones doing all the video editing and doing all the music stuff and creating the decorations. You're doing the same stuff. Let's just be honest. And if you're smaller like we are, and you might be doing a little bit more, first of all, you don't have to do a million things. But you might be doing more, but you can just plan ahead. And so I just think we just use busyness as an excuse to we speak it into existence. It's if you put on your calendar, it will make it happen. And so with sermon prep, I don't know what it has to do with sermon prep, but artificial deadlines is I think what we're trying to say, which can help with sermon prep. It'll make you feel less busy because it's no, this stuff is coming. I'm not going to wait till the week of. I'm going to plan some of these stuff ahead of time.
So on your calendar, you don't just have the word busy on the days?
There's no such thing. That is a 4-letter word for me because it literally is a 4-letter word.
It is, literally.
Yeah, so I want to be clear. You might have times where you have more going on, yes, but if you wait till the last minute, that is what makes the busyness feel busy because you haven't planned ahead of time. So for your sermon prep process, you want to do that. Number 3, personal devotions. We talk about these often. The closer you are and the more vibrant your relationship with Jesus, the better it is for your church. I mean, that's just how it is. Not sometimes you're going to have dry seasons and that sort of thing. I totally get it. But if it's not consistent, or if you don't have a rhythm or a schedule of how you're going to do it, it will drift. It's easily the first thing to cut because there's no necessarily ROI that you see right away. And because I'm quote unquote busy. And so I just you just calendar it and you just do it. Some days might be more deep than others. For me, certainly that's the case. On the weekends, it is a shorter thing for me. So on Friday and Saturday, kind of my days off. I mean, Saturday's my day off. Friday is a lot more relaxed. It's actually shorter, even though I technically have more time. And then Sunday through Thursday, when I have things to do, I actually spend more time doing it, which is fine. It works for me. For me, it's just the habit of I just do it. And so whatever it is for you, man, you just need to be intentional of it. Maybe you need to put on your calendar. Maybe you need to commit to. Maybe you need to tell someone, "Hey, here's what I'm doing," and ask them, to hold you accountable to it, or do something with some other people so you're doing it together. But it's the first thing to go. And over the long haul, you will not make it if you're really doing all this. I mean, what we're trying to do is lead people in a relationship with Jesus. And so if ours is not in a good spot because of lack of discipline, then it's going to be really hard for us to do this for other people.
Personal question, let's say you would spend your time with the Lord like in the mornings. Is there ever a time, maybe like a 3-month stretch, where you have to kind of change that because of like something that's going on in your life? And if you do, like, wouldn't you still see that as consistent because you're kind of shifting that whole thing somewhere else and doing it consistently in that small amount?
I think you should. If you need to change, it's fine, but you just need to make sure you do it. For me, I don't anymore. There's been times where I was like, like I've moved my schedule around. I just found that for me to do it consistently in the morning every day, like it has to be in the morning, or it's really easy for me to be like whatever. I also found too, it's easier for me to focus before I'm like checking my phone and working and all that sort of things. And so like I don't think you have to do it in the morning at all. It's best for me, even with like our kids and that sort of thing. I just found like I need to do it in the morning. But if you need to do it another time, that's fine. I just what it shouldn't happen is, well, this isn't working for me. I guess I'll try it at this time. It's like, well, I'm not going to try it. I'm going to do it at this time, or I'm going to do this thing now. That's what's important. And so you need to move things around, move it around. But it's not, I'm going to try. It's just, I'm going to do it. If it doesn't work, I'll change something else. But man, yeah, one question I ask myself is, would I want other people to follow Jesus the way I'm following Jesus? And part of that is like a character and integrity piece, but part of that is just like my personal relationship with Jesus. Like, am I doing things that I would commend to other people to do? And so asking myself that question is really helpful. Also, too, I think we mentioned recently my favorite definition of discipline by Craig Groeschel. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And so sometimes what I want now is to just go ahead and start my day and get things done. What I want most is to be a good pastor, a good husband, a good father, and someone who's walking closely with Jesus. And so if I want that most, then I just have to do it, even when I don't feel like I'm getting things out of it necessarily. Like I'm doing a discipleship group with the guys. Our group's about to come to an end, but the last couple of weeks we were doing Revelation. And how we do it, we do like one chapter a day for 4 to 5 days a week. I do some extra stuff on top of it, but that's what we do together. And you have to like write stuff down. After 2 weeks, I was like, guys, this ain't working. Like, it ain't doing anything for me. They're like, yeah. I was like, we're not finishing Revelation. We're doing something else. And I'm like, that's okay. Like, you know, I mean, you can study Revelation on your own, but just like, it just was not devotional at all. Yeah. And like the journaling thing, I was like, I got nothing here. Like, I don't. So anyway, find something that works. I think what's important here, maybe to your question, is whatever works for you, find out what works for you, not what works for somebody else. Whether it's a chapter, 2 chapters, whether it's a morning walk and you're just listening to the Bible on audio Bible, like you just find whatever works for you, and that's what matters. Don't try to compare to other people, because if you don't want to do it, it's not going to be helpful. You got to find out something that you actually want to do. So
that's good.
Number 4 is language for your connect moment, your giving moment, or anything that you say every week from stage. So, of course, the challenge is if you have different people doing we call them next steps or announcements or whatever, if you don't teach them how to say the same thing consistently, then it can be not explained very well. And so we've done a lot better job of this the last, couple months. It's like for us, for our connect moment, first of all, we say if you're new, we don't say, hey, if it's your first time, fill this out. We say, hey, if you're new with us, because oftentimes people will not fill it out on their first time. Now, it's okay if like sometimes it slips and somebody says first time, but they always say new first. That's what you want to lead with, because it's just, oftentimes it's like their second or third visit that they'll fill it out. So you want to be like, how you explain the Connect card or whatever, it doesn't have to be like word for word, although I'm not necessarily against it, but you want to be like telling people, hey, I want you to say it this way. So for us, it's like, hey, if you're new with us, thanks so much for joining us. There's a Connect card in the seat back in front of you, or you can text NCC Connect to 97,000. All that stuff's also on our screens at the same time. Drop it off at the Connect table in the lobby. We'll give you a Chick-fil-A gift card, something to that effect. Again, our lobby is really thin and long. It's the only table in the lobby. So it used to be the teal wall, which I recommend if you can say a color, but now our teal wall is all of our church plants. For us, we could say Connect table, but you could put a tablecloth on it, whatever. I think a color is best because if you just say Connect table, people don't know what that is. Yeah. It's a little bit easier for our environment because it's literally the only table. We have a screen that on the top that says new Connect here. And we have this big banner flag that says, so it's like super obvious. Yeah. So maybe if you have something that says Connect table, super obvious, that's fine, but whatever. And, so we say that, and then we also have this thing called Try 3 at New City, where we encourage you to come back 3 times. We know finding a new church, you can steal this if you want. We know finding a new church can be really hard and intimidating, and it's also hard to know everything there is to know about church in 1 week. So we encourage you to come back for 3 weeks, and after that time, you'll know this is the church for you. Now, whether you like the wording of like, this is the church for you, I don't care. That's just what we're saying. Because we just want people to, it's not a competition with other churches. Mm-hmm. We just want them to like come back a couple of times, and if not, go somewhere else. But like, don't just come here and then maybe a month from now go check another church out. It's actually, I don't know if worked is the right word, but we've done this since January, and I've had multiple people mention this try thing to me. Mm-hmm. And I've heard him say to other people. In fact, we had this older couple that started coming recently. And I think I said 70s before. I think I mentioned them because they watched us online. I don't know how old she is. I got lunch with him last week. I think she's younger, but he's 89. I thought he was like late 70s.
Oh, wow.
But he's 89. I'm so bad at this. But as he's walking out, he's got this like mobile walker thing. Anyway, he's like, we don't need to try. It's the second Sunday. We don't need to try 3. This is our church now. But I had a conversation with somebody else. We had our Discover lunch. We do it once a quarter, talk about New City, vision, mission, values for new people. And after I was talking to this one guy, and it was his second week, and he said after the first week, he hadn't been in church in 2 years. And he's a believer. He wanted to get reconnected. He's new to the area. And he said, what did he say to me? He said, I'm going to do the try 3. You guys said try 3, so I'm doing that. But he said, I think this is my church now. But he said that to me.
Yeah.
And so people are doing it. Now, not everyone's going to do it, but it's just a helpful way of like, hey, otherwise, if you don't tell people, if you do the connect moment, which we think you should do every service, it's the first thing in our next steps that we say, even if you're super small and there's nobody new there, the average person doesn't know if there's somebody new there or not. And you want them to know if they bring somebody, they'll be acknowledged in a non-awkward way. So it's our connect card. If you're new, you just want to, people have their own twist on it, but some of these words need to be the same. Otherwise, you never know who's going to say what. The same thing for us. We do our giving moment at the end of service. So after our last song, we do the doxology. We sing that. And then we end our service the same way every week. Connect again with us if you want to give, and then we say our bottom line in the New City Church you are sent. And for the giving moment, I've now been telling our next people to say, if you would like to give to the mission of New City, or if you want to support the mission of New City, here's how you give. Online, there's a graphic, or in the giving boxes. Even that's important because there's ways to talk about giving that's like, please help us, we need your money. Or like, we don't really need your money, but like, if you feel like giving. Yeah. And like, neither one of those are true. Like, it's not like, please help us, we need your money. But we also need financial resources. Yes. And so after hearing various people say different times, I was like, I need to tell people what to say. And when people, at least in our environment, when they said, if you'd like to give to the mission of New City, it sounds the most like, hey, we're doing something, we'd like to invite you in. Yeah. It doesn't sound like we're begging for money, nor does it sound like we don't need your help. And there's 2 ways to give. And so even just saying that the same way, now again, people can kind of say their own thing about it if they want after that, but it's like, it's consistent. So I know I just talked a lot there, but those are for us. So connect moment and giving every week. Whatever you say on top of that every week, you need to train people, especially if it's different people, what to actually say so that it's consistent.
Yes, we've, I think since we've had a couple staff changes, we've had like 2 or 3 people that are new doing next steps. And Dylan will email them.
Unless it's Brian.
Unless it's me.
I don't know why.
So I'll go up there and like, stuff.
Yeah.
Let's sing.
Everyone else I email them. But that's a good point. I do email them during the week of here's what's coming up.
And they appreciate that because, when you're doing next step, even if it's a small group of people, if you have like a smaller church or if it's, growing really well, it can still be intimidating, especially if they only do next steps like once a month.
And they're new to it. It's awkward. It is awkward.
They want to have, like, we even take a connect card up there with a Post-it note, and there's no problem having to glance at that. No big deal. But if people know what they're going to say before they go up there and they know these certain phrases they're supposed to say, if they get those phrases right, they get those phrases right, then they can still put a little bit of their personality into it, because you do want that. You don't want them to sound like a robot, but you do have those certain things you want to say. I do know that, like, try to stay away from, Dylan fussed at me. I think I said one morning, like, I have a couple of announcements, which is something, it's not that that's a bad word. It's just, it's a little.
It's like, wake me up when you're done with them. That's what I hear.
Exactly. It's just more, I don't want to say traditional, but it kind of is. It's language changes, and it's based on, your context. This is practical church planning. And so usually they do look, church plants do look different than some.
So don't you say don't say the word announcements,
or don't say.
That's the practical here.
Vestibule. You want to say lobby.
Someone said foyer recently. I'm like, guys, where are you coming up with these words? It is a lobby and it is an auditorium. That's what we call it.
But I had a conversation with someone who came up to the Connect table.
They're like, where's the vestibule?
Where's the vestibule? You're in it. And they said, I'm definitely going to give New City 3 tries. Yeah. So like, that's the first time they came. That was the first time I said it. Yep. So having those clever little phrases and saying them consistently it's huge. And people will remember that. And when they can recall it, And then even with the whole, if you want to be a part of the mission of New City, you're wanting them to you're inviting them to come on a journey with you and to be a part of what's going on. So it's kind of this not FOMO, you're not trying to create that, but there is this thing I definitely want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I would even say kind of don't obsess over it, but think through those phrases you're going to say. Make sure that they actually carry weight and that they're easy to remember because it really can go a long way.
Yeah. So the things you say every week, you want to have some common wording. We also, in our run through, make the next steps person go through it. So if they say something off, I'm not going to be correcting them on everything because that's just not helpful. But I might say, hey, here's one or two things to say differently at the service. We also do that's helpful. I'll email them. I won't tell them exactly what to say, but I'll give them the highlights. We typically do 3 to 4 next steps. That's pretty much what we do. It takes us about 90 seconds. Is typically about how long it is. One of those also always involves the connect. So 2 to 3 other than that. And I email them ahead of time, and then we give them a sticky note where they hold our connect card. I would highly recommend that as well. So they're holding it the whole time. People can see it when they say connect card. They hold it up. Yep. And on the back of it, on a sticky note, I write the 3 or 4 main things and I don't know, 7 or 8 words for each of them. So for the Connect card, I just say Connect card.
NCC Connect.
I say card or NCC Connect to 97,000 because they already know. And so just making sure they say that thing. Or if there's an upcoming event, I'll just put, even though there's a graphic behind them, I'll put the date and the time. So we're doing Pizza in the Park in a couple weeks. So this week it'll be Pizza in the Park, and I'll have the date and the time and the address so they can just see it.
Well, and that's helpful because there was one time, I think the first time I had done it, because I hadn't been on stage in a while, I depended upon the screen. And so what Dylan had pointed out is, that's fine. They're hearing what you say, but you're not talking to them. Yep. And so they kind of have a tendency to probably check out. So you say it, you're looking at them, and if you forget something, the screen is kind of like that fail-safe. So they're going to get the information, and they felt like you were actually interacting with them.
This is turning into how to do better next steps than consistency. But with that, I think that's a good point too. Is don't depend on the screens because the screen person's sometimes they miss it or whatever. So if you're turning around, depending on where your screens are, it looks like you don't know what you're saying, and just have it in front of them. Let them have the information that they need, and so that they can talk about it. They don't need to be looking around for it. The screens people will follow them, but not depend on them. So that's whatever you do consistently, put wording to it. I was going to say one other thing about next steps, and now I forget. So
my problem.
That's right. So language, you want to be consistent so that people notice. I was going to say, there's a side note for the try 3 thing. It also gives our people language when they're talking to new people. It's hey, you can also say, hey, come back another time or come back 3 times. With that, I would not encourage, this is all contextual to your moment. We were trying to figure out, first, it was going to be 4, Connect 4, because the Connect 4. But it's then we had to explain what that means. What does that mean, Connect 4? So try 3 is simple. It's 3 times. We've thought there's other churches in the past that would do 5 or 6. I was watching this quick live stream of this other church the other day, and it just happened to be they're in their next step moment or whatever, and they have a stick 6, which is fine. But I'm man, and they said come back 6 times in a row, and I'm there's no way. Even your own people. Most people don't come to church 6 times. Even people that are really consistent, they'll come maybe 4 or 5 times, take a week off, go out of town, get sick. I'm especially a new person, they ain't coming 6 times in a row to a new church. There is no way. Unless they have been following Jesus forever, they just moved to the area, and they're very committed to finding a church right away. So for us, the 3 or 4, and our goal is to do it 3 times in a row, but we don't say 3 times in a row. I just want them to think, I need to come back 3 times. Now, hopefully it's going to be closer, but again, I'm not trying to lower the bar, but if you say come back 5 or 6 times in a row, automatically I'm thinking if it seems too unattainable, they're probably not going to do it, if that makes sense. So make it super simple. Make it seem I could come back 3 times. Now, maybe it takes them 4 weeks, but it's I said 3 sounds like anybody can do it. 6 sounds really hard.
And don't say steer near here for half a year.
Bro, that was good.
That was awful.
Steer near here.
If you go back and watch this video, you can see that while you're talking, I am staring out into space trying to think of something clever.
Steer near here for half a year. Wow. Yeah, don't do that. Although that sounds awesome.
It does. Put it on a shirt.
Yeah, but that sounds unrealistic. So you want to maybe stretch them a little bit, but don't make it seem like they're not gonna. They're gonna if they in their mind say no right away, then you've already lost. Yeah. So make it realistic. So anyway, your language for your connect moment or giving or anything you say every week. If you do a benediction or whatever, just and different people do it. If you want to introduce it a certain way, just say, here's how we're going to do it, and just help people be clear with that. Number 5 is your service beginning and ending on time. I mean, this is particularly important if in a Western American context. Obviously, this is not more holy or spiritual. It depends on where you live, your culture, all that sort of thing. So this is particularly in a Western environment where people are late to things, but it's like we all have times and phones and watches and clock. Like we're very, very much like things start on time.
Yes.
Things. So that's just our culture. You want to start on time. No matter how many people are there, the longer you wait to start, people pick up on it, and they're just going to come later and later. Like they're just, if people come 5 minutes late, they're always coming 5 minutes late. And so if you start at 10 o'clock and you don't actually start till 10:12 because you keep pulling it back, they ain't showing up till 10:17. Like it doesn't matter. So just know that. We have a little hack. We start a minute after. So we have a 5-minute countdown, and then we have a 2-minute video. And a 2-minute video always starts at 11. Well, not 11 yet. Like if it's at 9:30 service, 9:29, or if it's a 11 o'clock service, 10:59.
Yes.
And so the service actually starts 1 minute late. This is kind of a more technical piece, but on ProPresenter, there's like a 5-minute countdown that just goes over our screens, like on the bottom corner. And then at 2 minutes, we switch to a video. Yep. The nice thing about this is that like we tell our guys, like, hey, if you got to the sound booth late or you started it late, still start the 2-minute video at 1 minute before. So there's a little bit of like, even if they like messed up on the 5 minutes, it's still the 2 minutes always at 2 minutes. So it gives you an extra minute. And then, similarly, so our services are about 65 minutes right now. There's probably a buffer of about 3 minutes either way, 4 minutes either way. I would say anything more than a 5-minute buffer, it then becomes unpredictable in people's minds, especially if your services are generally an hour-ish. I mean, if your services are 2 hours, then you could have a 10-minute buffer, something like that. But for us, about 65 minutes, and it's about 3 minutes, give or take. So it's not like, oh, time's up, like we got to get done, or like it's time for lunch, we got to be done. But we're conscious, like I'm conscious about the sermon. We're conscious about what's going on in the service. We typically do 4 songs. Sometimes we'll do 3 if there's a video. Or we do confession after the sermon most weeks. Sometimes we'll pull it out. I'll be like, hey, if I invite the band up, we'll go into confession. If I pray, we won't because something's going on. If we've got communion, sometimes we do confession with communion. Sometimes we don't. And so there's things in our service that like we can move around to make it work. Like if we've got a longer video, then we might take a song out. Or instead of like this week, we still did confession and 4 songs, but we had Church Planting Sunday, Acts Around Church Planting Sunday, and so we had a little video from all of our churches that we currently support. And so instead of our bumper video, even though the church planting video was longer, it still saved us a minute. So we put that for the bumper video. So anyway, we move things around, especially if you have multiple services, if you have kids ministry, like they got to know what's happening. Obviously things can happen. Sometimes things go longer and that's okay. People never complain if they go shorter. So that's okay too. But you just want to be like thinking of like, people need to know what to expect. I remember this is kind of funny. The building we're in now, way back before we actually moved into this building, a couple of us came on a Sunday morning to see what it was like on Sunday, and we happened to come on the Sunday where this current campus pastor was stepping out and a new guy was coming in, and so there was like this like send off, and it was like an 80-minute service, and they typically do an hour. And they did all their normal stuff, and then they did this big thing at the end of service. And I'm like, that's great, but like I'm a new person, I'm like, I don't care. What they should have done is shorten some things up, move some things around, or had said up front, hey, this is a little bit different. But like at no point was it, even at the end, there was no acknowledgement of like, this was way longer than we normally do. It was like 80 or maybe it was 90 minutes. I mean, it was something that was just like, wow, like that was a big difference.
Yeah.
And so just be cognizant of that. People need to know what to expect. Again, going to those consistency things. If they don't know what to expect, there's a harder time for them to show up.
Well, and when with anything, when people know what to expect for the most part, they'll buy in more. Mm-hmm. They won't be, I can really see them worshiping more because they know what to expect rather than like, oh, is this the last song?
Right.
And so it's like, not like they're saving their lungs for the next song, but like,
right.
So that's very helpful. But even with starting the 2-minute countdown, there's music with it. So that's a trigger for people.
Yeah.
It gives us time to kind of go live on YouTube and Facebook. And we always talk before we do. So there's rehearsal in the beginning, they go over some songs, and then we do the live run through. And we always talk before then. We'll say, hey, we plan on having confession, but for if something happens or,
right.
A backup plan is if I welcome the band up, then that means we're not doing confession. So people know how to pivot. And that's very important because you will have things that just happen, just blips, especially with ProPresenter.
Or sometimes the sermon just goes longer. I mean, I'm pretty good on knowing it, but there's times I'm like, this is going to be longer, and it's just, I'm looking at the clock, especially because we do 2 services now, and with the kids, I'm like, I need to do this. So like for us, it makes it a little bit easier because we do confession, and I just found it's better for us. I just invite the band up, like I don't pray and then do confession because then we pray again. And so if I do pray, I can say, hey, if I pray, then you just come up and we won't do confession, and the people know it. So I don't know, there's ways, like you're saying, there's ways to kind of figure it out.
And usually, if we do change something that's unusual, it's usually in the beginning, I think, or right before the sermon. Like, we might lead with next steps because there's something we want to do, and then there's 2 songs, or there's a song, next step song, and then only, usually there's 2 songs after service in the doxology. Like, that's that consistent thing. But yeah, it's the consistency, and that just means that you do have to be prepared. We talked about this in another podcast where it's like, doing your best doesn't mean doing it perfectly.
Right.
It just means with what you have and what's been given to you, and if it was chaotic that week, then so be it. But you did the best you could with what you had.
And it's helpful too, during our run through, like I'll say, hey, this week this might happen, and so we can actually, like, people know.
Yes.
It's also helpful too, like in terms of saving time. I mean, if you got a video, and you typically do a bumper video, like that's a way to do it. I mean, your video might be longer than your bumper video, but that could save you a minute. We typically do a song and then next steps because there's more people in there and all that sort of thing. Sometimes we move it around just because, but sometimes we'll put next steps first because it is technically shorter than coming up, having people sit down, whatever, do next steps, have them stand back up. It's quicker to just start with next steps and then having them stand once. So if you're trying to save time for whatever reason, you can do it that way. We never cut the end. Like we always say, connect and giving, unless we are like sending like a church planter out, or we've got a missionary, like unless there's like, that's just way more important.
Yes.
That's the only time we take that out, but we never cut that out because especially at the end, the next steps, not everyone's there in the beginning. And so hitting the connect card in the beginning of your service and at the end of the service is important because you'll have some new people who didn't hear it or just need to be reminded. Maybe they heard it and they're like, oh, actually, I do want to try 3, or I do actually want to do the connect card. Like in the beginning of the service, they're not quite sure. They had a good time. Sure, I'll drop it off. So beginning and ending at the same time is helpful. And then last but not least, serving expectations. This is also a really big one. Even one of the things we say, like, when we ask people to serve, I mean, it's not like we do serve pushes. I don't really have the next step people go through all this information, but like at our Discover lunches or when we do serve pushes, I include it like in my sermon. I'll put it in there. Like, we're just clear of like, when you sign up to serve, here's what this looks like, because churches do it differently. Some people have been burnt out. I'm not saying there's right or wrong. It's just how we do it here. We ask you to serve once a month. Some people can serve twice. If they want to serve more, no one's allowed to serve every week because what'll happen is they'll say yes and then they'll be burnt out and then they'll just stop serving. Whereas if you just were like, no, they'll do it for the long haul. But you want to be very clear, like, what time do people come? How long do they stay? What does it look like? What you don't want to have happen is like, some people serve every week. Some people come at this time. Some people come at this time. Some people leave at this time. Like, here are the expectations. You're going to have some people who do above and beyond, which is great. But for this, you want to have baseline expectations that is the same for everybody.
I think I spoke about this maybe a month ago. I can't remember. But this has been challenging because we go into 2 services. So those who are serving are staying here just a little longer, especially if you like are a coordinator next steps. You are here for both services. But before we did that, we reached out to everybody serving and let them know the expectations, and even gave them an opportunity, like, hey, because some people want to serve, but they want to break and they don't know how to say it. Some people are scared. So it's like, if you give them an opportunity, like, hey, we're moving to 2 services, expectations are changing slightly. Are you still in? Is this something you still like to do? And it gives them a way to maybe take a break. It's not confrontational. It lets them be the one to make the decision, because it can be kind of nerve-wracking going and telling someone, hey, I don't want to serve anymore, because they're like, oh, how's that going to make me look? And stuff like that. So,
or serve in a different position.
Exactly. Something. I actually had someone come to me and say, hey, such and such isn't working. Do you have a need over, like, where could I serve for hospitality? I'm like, well, we really have a need here. So communicate what that need is. And sometimes you want to, if you know the person asking you, you kind of want to suggest something that you think they'll be comfortable with, but you really don't know what they'll be comfortable with. People will surprise you.
We got this guy who's super introverted, and we're just like, why don't you do like production? And he's like, nope, I want to be at the door. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I would not expect that. But
no,
okay.
Maybe it's his way of like, pushing the envelope a little bit, or getting out there, or maybe that's a way where he doesn't even maybe say much. It's just interacting with people is that upper. I don't know what I'm saying.
But he does it. Surprising.
He does it. Yes. And then there was another instance where, like, I have a reserve for people who said I'm willing to serve more than once a week. So
like if you need something, or
so if you need something, you need to swap around. Like, that's awesome to have those people. Still only schedule them once a month. Like, that's kind of what you have in mind, but know that you can use them. So there's just expectations, communication. What I was speaking about, and I'll stop rambling, is there was one individual that came to me because we had to have 2 services to do some cleaning and setup. They have to come a little earlier, and they don't live too close, about 30 minutes out. And so I really did need that individual person to show up like at 8:15 rather than 8:30, 8:45. And so I was just like, hey, I said, I don't want this to be a burden for you. So they did this, and then they did the greeting. I said, let's just have you do the greeting. If that makes you enjoy it more, to where every Sunday that you're serving, you don't have anxiety that whole entire week. Like, you don't want that from people. And so that just meant I had to find somewhere else. But the fact that they felt heard was huge. It might have been an imposition for me for just a little bit, but that's just kind of the nature of the job when you serve other people. Yeah.
So again, baseline expectations. We've gone to 2 services at our old space, and then obviously this space. And so we learned from the last time too. Whenever you change expectations, or maybe you don't have any, so you're trying to set some up, you're going to have some people that are used to what it was before and are going to say, well, can I do this? This is where you have to lead. You have to be willing to say, like, this is what we're asking for people. If you can't do it or don't want to do it, that's fine. You could try this position, or, just not serve for now. But when you start making exceptions, good luck. I mean, so it is hard and it is awkward, but do it in a kind, loving way. Here's what it looks like. You can't, like, I remember when we first launched, we had this guy who was one of our sound guys, and he wanted to come. I don't remember what time it was. We were at one service. He wanted to come like 30 minutes later when it was his turn to serve. And it's like, you can't do that. Yeah. Like, you if you're going to be in this position, then you hear the other ones. But it's just like, good luck trying to manage that. So here are the baseline expectations. Like Brian said, some people do more, and that's fine. But if you serve, here's what time you show up, here's what time you leave, here's what the role looks like. If you want to try something else, that's fine. But this is what it looks like. You got to be consistent. Otherwise, when you're asking people to serve, it's like, what are you actually asking them? They don't know. It's the same thing with, like, when I talk about people planning a church and a timeline. Like, when you ask them, hey, you want to join my launch team? That's it. Like, that is not. What am I like answering? So I talk about this in the launch team course, the Growing Your Launch Team course. But, like, you want to say, like, here's what the next 6 months are going to look like. Here's how often we meet. Here's the things that we're doing. Do you want to be a part of this? Like, it's so much easier for me to say yes or no to what you're asking me than, like, should I join your launch team? Like, when are we launching? What are your expectations of me? If you're proactive about those things, people are much more likely to say yes, because it's showed that you've clearly thought about it. So serving expectations are a thing that you need for your church to thrive. So hopefully this episode was helpful. I'm just trying to tighten in on some of these things. Consistency over the long haul will lead to a lot better results, especially once you get systems in place. It'll become a lot easier to get people acclimated and get people in certain things because you figured out what is working. If you're, like, all over the place, then it's just really hard to figure out what works and what doesn't.
So. And as you grow, you're going to have to delegate some of the stuff, so your hand can't be in everything, and you want to have a good system. Yeah. So those were 6 things that need consistency for your church to thrive. Hopefully this episode was helpful. You can connect with us on Facebook. If you go to the Practical Church Planting Facebook group, you can join that group. People are asking lots of questions, so that's another way to connect. And thanks for joining us. We'll be with you next week on Practical Church Planting. Later days.